Did everyone hear that? Vanessa laughed, lifting her plastic cup as if she'd just delivered the joke of the summer. If Emma vanished tomorrow, nobody would even notice. The backyard exploded with laughter. Someone nearly dropped a hot dog from laughing so hard. A cousin slapped the picnic table. Even my father-in-law grinned into his drink. I didn't. My eyes searched for one person. My husband. He was standing beside the grill with a spatula in one hand, looking directly at me. For one impossible second, I thought he'd tell his sister she'd gone too far. Instead, he shrugged. "Come on," he said with a crooked smile. "She's kidding." That hurt more than the joke. Before we continue, drop your city and country in the comments below. And if you enjoy revenge stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. I'd spent the last 4 hours making sure everyone else enjoyed the holiday. I'd picked up the groceries when someone forgot them. I'd kept the kids entertained while the adults relaxed. I'd refilled empty trays before anyone noticed they were empty. I'd even cleaned a spilled drink without a word. And somehow I was still the punchline. I slowly raised my cup. Challenge accepted. The laughter faded. Vanessa blinked before rolling her eyes. "Oh, don't be dramatic." I smiled for the first time all afternoon. "I won't." I took one sip, set the cup on the table, and walked toward the house while everyone assumed I'd be back before dessert. None of them realized they had just watched me leave for the last time. My name is Emma Carter, and disappearing wasn't something I planned. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a stunt. It was the moment I finally stopped begging to be seen by people who had already decided I wasn't worth noticing. My husband's family had always treated me like useful background furniture. If something needed organizing, I handled it. If birthdays were remembered, vacations coordinated, gifts purchased, doctor's appointments tracked, or family emergencies smoothed over, somehow it all landed on me. No one asked how it happened. They simply expected it. Over the years, Vanessa had become the loudest voice in every room. People laughed when she laughed. They agreed when she spoke. Little insults aimed at me had become part of every holiday, and everyone accepted them because confronting her was harder than letting me absorb the blow. That 4th of July was different only because something inside me finally broke. While fireworks cracked across the evening sky outside, I quietly packed a suitcase with the things that actually belonged to me. My husband never came upstairs to ask where I was going. Before sunrise on July 5th, I drove away without leaving a forwarding address. By the time anyone reached for their phones, every one of their numbers had already been blocked. They thought I'd cool off and come back. They had no idea that by the time they noticed I was gone, I had already decided they would never see me again. The highway was almost empty as the sun began creeping over the horizon. For the first time in years, I wasn't driving somewhere because someone else needed me. No grocery list. No forgotten birthday gift. No emergency phone call. Just miles of open road and the strange silence that comes after making a decision you can't undo. My phone buzzed once before I powered it off. I didn't need to see who was calling. If anyone had really wanted to stop me, they had their chance while I was standing in that backyard waiting for someone, anyone, to say, "Enough." No one had. 3 weeks later, I unpacked the last moving box in a one-bedroom apartment nearly 300 miles away. The place wasn't impressive. The kitchen was tiny. The bedroom overlooked a parking lot. But every piece of furniture inside belonged to me. For the first time since my wedding, every decision in the apartment was mine too. I found a new administrative job at a local engineering firm. The work wasn't glamorous, but it suited me. Within days, my manager noticed something. "Emma," she said one afternoon, "I don't know how you keep everything organized." I laughed quietly. "You'd be surprised what you can get used to." She smiled. "Well, thank you. You've made everyone's lives easier already." The words caught me off guard. Thank you. It had been so long since I'd heard them that they almost sounded unfamiliar. Back home, the family wasn't nearly as concerned as I imagined. According to the handful of messages that slipped through before I changed everything, Vanessa had already decided what my disappearance meant. She's throwing a tantrum, she'd told everyone. Give her a week. My husband apparently agreed. One voicemail simply said, Emma, this has gone far enough. Call me when you're ready to act like an adult. There wasn't a single apology. Not one person asked why I had left. Only when I planned to return. I deleted the voicemail without listening again. The weeks turned into months. I built routines that belonged only to me. Saturday mornings became coffee and bookstore visits. Evenings were quiet walks instead of family group chats demanding favors. I slept through entire nights without worrying that someone would text asking me to fix another forgotten problem. Little by little, I stopped reaching for my phone whenever it vibrated. There was no one expecting me to solve anything anymore. And it felt peaceful. Then November arrived. Thanksgiving had always been my busiest holiday. Every year I coordinated invitations, tracked dietary restrictions, reminded relatives what dishes to bring, confirmed seating, bought gifts for the annual family exchange, and somehow made it all look effortless. This year, I did none of it. Instead, I baked a small turkey breast for myself, turned on music, and enjoyed dinner without rushing to please anyone else. Hundreds of miles away, my former in-laws gathered without me for the first time. Before dessert was even served, my phone lit up with a message from a cousin whose number I'd forgotten to block. It contained only one sentence. Everything's a disaster, and people are finally starting to ask who used to keep this family together. The next morning, I almost deleted the message without reading it again. Instead, I stared at it while my coffee grew cold. Everything's a disaster. For a long time, I'd convinced myself I wasn't as important as Vanessa claimed I wasn't. Maybe I had exaggerated my own role. Maybe families really did move on without one person. Then another message came through. You wouldn't believe what happened yesterday. I set the phone face down. Whatever was happening back there, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. Back at my old in-laws' house, Thanksgiving had unraveled before dinner was even ready. No one had confirmed who was bringing what. 3 different families showed up with mashed potatoes. No one brought dinner rolls. The turkey finished cooking almost an hour before anyone realized the side dishes weren't ready. What happened? My father-in-law finally asked. We've been doing this the same way for years. Vanessa crossed her arms. People just didn't communicate. Her younger brother frowned. No, Emma used to send everyone reminders. The table went quiet for a second. Vanessa laughed it off. Seriously, we're blaming this on Emma now. No one answered. The weeks that followed only made things worse. An elderly aunt missed an important specialist appointment because nobody reminded her about the transportation schedule Emma had quietly coordinated every year. Christmas gift exchanges became a mess after names were assigned twice, and several relatives received nothing at all. A family cabin reservation expired because no one remembered the annual payment deadline. Each mistake seemed small by itself. Together, they became impossible to ignore. At nearly every gathering, someone asked the same question. Didn't Emma usually handle that? Vanessa refused to admit there was a pattern. Oh, please, she snapped during one family dinner. We're all adults. We don't need one person organizing our lives. Then why is everything falling apart? Her brother asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she accused everyone else of being lazy. The argument spread around the room. People who had rarely disagreed before were suddenly pointing fingers at each other. Without realizing it, they had spent years depending on one person while pretending she wasn't doing anything important. Even my former husband began noticing the difference. He searched through old emails, trying to find reservation numbers for the annual family vacation. Instead, he discovered something else. Every confirmation, every reminder, every itinerary, every backup plan, every message had come from me. Not once had anyone thanked me in reply. Most responses simply read, "Got it," or "Can you handle one more thing?" For the first time since I'd left, he stopped telling people I'd overreacted. One Sunday afternoon, the extended family gathered again to plan the coming year. Halfway through the discussion, nobody could agree on birthdays, anniversaries, holiday hosts, or even which relatives were attending. Finally, Emma's quietest cousin looked around the room and spoke the words no one wanted to admit. I don't think we ever actually knew everything she did. No one laughed this time. Nearly a year after that 4th of July cookout, my life no longer revolved around someone else's calendar. I had a job where people noticed when I stayed late, not because they expected it, but because they appreciated it. I had neighbors who knocked on my door just to invite me over for coffee. I had friends who asked, "How are you?" and actually waited for the answer. It still felt unfamiliar, but it also felt right. For the first time in years, I wasn't disappearing into everyone else's needs. I was finally visible to myself. Back home, things hadn't improved. If anything, the cracks had widened. The family still gathered, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations that once flowed easily now stalled over forgotten plans and unresolved resentment. People who had always assumed everything would somehow work out were now discovering that somehow had been me. My former husband had spent months calling from different numbers. Each one went unanswered. He sent emails. No reply. He mailed letters to my last known address. They came back unopened. Eventually, he filed for divorce. Not because he'd stopped hoping I'd return, but because he had finally accepted that I wasn't going to. The divorce forced uncomfortable conversations. During one meeting with relatives, my father-in-law quietly admitted, "I thought she'd cool off after a few days." His wife shook her head. We never asked why she left. The room fell silent. Vanessa tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. She made her choice. Can we stop acting like she's some kind of saint? Her younger brother looked at her across the table. No. Everyone turned toward him. You were the one who kept making those jokes. Vanessa opened her mouth. He didn't let her interrupt. And the rest of us laughed because it was easier than telling you to stop. No one defended her. For the first time, the family wasn't following Vanessa's lead. A month later, a mutual acquaintance reached out to me. "I know you blocked everyone," she said gently, "but someone asked if I'd pass this along." She handed me a single handwritten envelope. There was no return address. Inside were several pages. The first line read, "Emma, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I'm sorry." The apology wasn't dramatic. There were no excuses. No demands. No requests for another chance. Just an honest acknowledgement that my silence had forced people to examine years of behavior they'd never questioned before. I folded the letter carefully. Then I placed it back inside the envelope. I didn't write back. Some apologies deserve to be heard. They don't always deserve a response. Not long afterward, while sorting through old shared family files, my former husband uncovered years of digital folders. Holiday budgets, travel itineraries, medical reminder spreadsheets, birthday lists, emergency contacts, gift receipts, meal plans, backup schedules. Every document had one name attached. Emma. He kept scrolling. The folders stretched back almost a decade. He finally understood something no one had seen while I was there. The family hadn't lost someone who occasionally helped. They had lost the person quietly holding dozens of moving pieces together without ever asking for recognition. Exactly 1 year after the cookout, another envelope arrived in my mailbox. On the front was a familiar family address. Inside was an invitation to the annual 4th of July gathering. I stared at it for a long moment before setting it on the kitchen table, unopened. The invitation stayed on my kitchen table for 3 days. Every time I walked past it, I felt nothing. A year earlier, I would have spent hours wondering what everyone expected from me. Was I supposed to forgive them? Was I supposed to explain myself? Was I supposed to make everyone feel better? Now, those questions no longer belonged to me. On the 4th day, I opened the envelope. Inside was a simple invitation to the family's annual 4th of July cookout. No speeches, no promises, just the date, the time, and a handwritten note at the bottom. "We hope you'll come." I folded it back up and placed it in the recycling bin. That was my answer. Later that week, the mutual acquaintance who had delivered the apology letter called. "I figured you'd want to know what happened." I listened quietly. The cookout wasn't anything like it used to be. Attendance was smaller. Several relatives had chosen not to come after months of arguments. The elaborate decorations were gone. No coordinated games for the children. No carefully planned meal. People arrived at different times because no one had organized a schedule. Instead of laughter filling the backyard, there were long stretches of awkward silence. The traditions everyone had assumed would always exist had slowly disappeared. Not because they couldn't continue them, because the person who had quietly made them happen was no longer there. My former husband had attended. According to my friend, he'd spent most of the afternoon helping clean up. At one point, he admitted something out loud that no one argued with. I thought silence meant she didn't care. He looked around the yard. I was wrong. My father-in-law nodded slowly. We confused reliability with obligation. My mother-in-law wiped tears from her eyes. We kept thanking each other for holidays Emma created. No one tried to deny it anymore. The truth had become too obvious. Vanessa arrived late. For the first time anyone could remember, she wasn't the loudest person in the yard. She approached a small group of relatives and quietly said, "If Emma ever talks to any of you, tell her I'm sorry." No one mocked her. No one applauded her either. An apology couldn't erase years of casual cruelty. More importantly, it couldn't restore the trust that had been broken one joke at a time. The authority she'd once held over every family gathering had quietly disappeared. People no longer looked to her to decide what was funny, acceptable, or true. A few weeks later, my divorce became final. There wasn't a dramatic courtroom confrontation. No angry phone calls. No last-minute pleas. Just signatures. When I walked out of the courthouse, it felt less like losing a marriage and more like setting down something I'd been carrying for far too long. Back at work, my team surprised me with lunch after we completed a major project. My manager stood and raised a glass. "I just wanted to say thank you, Emma. None of this would have come together without you." Everyone around the table smiled. Several people applauded. For a second, I didn't know what to do. Then I laughed. Not because it was overwhelming. Because it was so simple. Recognition. Respect. Gratitude. The very things I'd spent years searching for in the wrong place. The following 4th of July looked nothing like the one before. Instead of standing in a crowded backyard trying to make everyone else happy, I sat on a blanket in a city park with friends who knew me as more than someone who solved problems. No one handed me a checklist. No one expected me to refill trays or remember who liked what. When the fireworks began, we simply watched the sky. One of my friends smiled and asked, "You okay?" I looked at the colors exploding overhead and answered honestly, "I am now." A year earlier, Someone had laughed and said that if I disappeared, nobody would even notice. They were wrong. They noticed only after I was gone. And by then, I had finally found a life where I never had to wonder whether I mattered again.